How are
Hi.
you, Sarah?
Good. How are you?
Good. Welcome to PR Tech Wednesdays, the weekly webinar where thought leaders discuss the latest in PR tech. If it's Wednesday, it's PR Tech Wednesdays. We do this every Wednesday from 12 to 1 Pacific. It's free. And this is a community. It's a place for you to come and ask questions. So hopefully you've been reading my emails and you got out of your pajamas and you combed your hair and you're ready to come on screen and ask your question. And, if you're working on something that you want to gut check, or you just have an idea you want to sort of bounce off of Sarah or myself, or really anybody else that wants to comment on something that was said previously, that's what this is about. So our guest today is Sarah Evans. She is a digital strategist who focuses on leveraging earned, owned, and shared media to connect digital lifestyle brands with target audiences. That's kind of her sweet spot. Her clients include PayPal, Cox Communication, MGM International, and Walmart. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. It's longtime friend, so it's a first time caller. I'm excited to be here today.
I know. I remember when you were first, when your story came out. I want to show everybody on the call here a story that ran in Vanity Fair, and it was America's Tweethearts was the story, and it was celebrities and socialites and Sarah amongst them. And at the time, it was Twitter was just becoming big, and this was a really hot story. And then I know at that time you were nice enough to be interviewed on my podcast at the time, On the Record Online.
A long time ago, I said pre-kids. I don't even know that person.
Well, you look pretty much the same to me.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So before we get started, I want to give you something that I know you're going to appreciate. We're going to be talking about owned, earned, and shared media here today. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about sharing content over social networks or platforms that we don't own. And these are amazing channels for building visibility and credibility for yourself and your clients. But there are also a few agencies or brands that can say that they get most of their best traffic from social. Most of the traffic that's converting on the B2B and B2B and B2C side is traffic that comes from search, and we call that organic traffic. Mm-hmm. So, the thing that's different about search traffic is, rather than just hanging out in Facebook or hanging out in Instagram, not really for any reason, maybe just to waste some time and then maybe being interested in something and clicking on a link, someone who's searched on Google is obviously pre-qualified. They sort of confessed what they're looking for. They've searched a question that they have. And if they find your site and you can solve that problem for them, they are going to convert at a much higher level. Right? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it really fall? And by the same measure, if you're making a bunch of content and no one can find it through search, is it even worth making? So I produced a course on the basics of search engine optimization for marketing and PR people. It's a non-technical course, but it's a course designed to introduce you to SEO. And I'm going to make that available to you for free. I'm going to give you a link where you can get it. So get something to write it down. The course covers keyword discovery, organic traffic versus referral traffic, citation indexing, metadata, mobile search, and more. And as I said, it's not technical. If you're a marketing or a PR person and you want to sort of up your game and learn search engine optimization, this is a great opportunity to do it. Also, I have a private Facebook group where you can ask questions about the class. And if you sign up, you get a link to the private Facebook page. Okay, so if you're ready, you can access my course, The Basics of SEO, at ericschwartzman.com/SEO class. Again, I'm offering free access to The Basics of SEO. It's an online course, and you can get it at ericschwartzman.com/SEO class. Our bookstagram of the week, ta-da, is You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. Now, I want to say the story of this because I hate self-help books. Like if there was self-help book repellent, I would cover myself from it head to toe before I walked into a bookstore. But I went into the bookstore at LAX before I was getting on a transatlantic flight, and I saw this book, and I kind of like, cringed and thought, oh my God, I would never read a book like that. How lame. And then I saw on the top it said New York Times bestseller #1. And so I had this teachable moment where I sort of, the ice around my facade melted, and I thought to myself, you know what? Could I actually read something this shallow and this meaningless? And if I did actually buy the book and read it, how would I make sure that no one saw me reading it? So I waited till the bookstore kind of thinned out. There was no one in there. And then kind of like, a teenager peeking at a girly mag, I sort of, kind of looked into it when no one was looking. And I thought, you know what? I came onto this one quote. I want to read it for you. All you have to do is make the choice to let go of everything you're attached to that's not serving you and manifest the reality you want. Life is an illusion created by your perception, and it can be changed the moment you choose to change it. And I read that and I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy the book. So I kind of hid it under my carry-on, and I figured I'd, just keep it down on the tray table so no one could see it when I was reading. And I freaking devoured this book. I loved it. I got so much out of it. And it proves that even a stubborn, hard-headed guy like me can learn something new. So this is the bookstagram of the week. I think you'll enjoy it if you have a chance to pick it up. Okay, let's get started. The chat room is open for questions. So again, if you have any ideas you want to bounce off Sarah or myself, ask away. I'm gonna undo the share here so we're bigger on the screen. Okay. So let's start with a discussion about earned media, because I know you do a lot of media relations on behalf of your clients. So what's happening in the earned media space right now?
Well, I will tell you, Eric, and anyone who works in the PR space right now, in the past 5 weeks has been one of the most dynamic shifts I've ever seen. The way things even are cyclical now, it might be by 48 hours or a week, just because of COVID-19, with reporters switching beats, with mass journalist layoffs. I think we're at 23,000 either furloughed or laid off. And things are just changing how quick we need resources to be able to get to reporters, the types of stories being covered. At no other time have I been so diligent about creating, monitoring Twitter lists and all sorts of different tools that we have on the back end to see what are reporters writing about right now, what are they searching, keeping continuous litmus tests on what headlines are producing or what assignment directors are looking for. So while things are changing, we're also trying to be a resource for media. So it's a practice we've always done where we will send out a source, even if it's not a client, but we're doing that more so than ever. We're saying, if you need someone urgent, we'll put out a query for you. We'll help secure them for you. How can we be a resource? How can we help without overstepping in a role? But we've been sourcing more than ever earned media placements, and of course it all coincides with our full scope services plan of how we then amplify in social or create for owned, and it runs the gamut, but it's still extremely relevant. And the other day I was on a show talking about what's old is new again. Everything from telephone calls to direct mail to media relations, all of the things people were moving or seem to be moving away from have come back full force right now.
So when you're pitching, I guess, everyone's saying, well, you don't want to be too aggressive right now. You want to sort of be sensitive to what's going on. A lot of people are out of work. A lot of people are sick. Is that still the case? Are you still, or are people starting to get tired of it and think, you know what, let's get on with it. Let's start hearing regular news stories again. When you're talking to journalists, how has their aptitude for non-COVID-19 news changed? Is it starting to wake up again, or is it still COVID-19 all the time?
Right now, the reporters we're working with, it is all COVID-19. Not to say that it's not changing. If you do a quick scope of, let's say, top morning show producers, you will see a myriad of different topics coming through right now. When you made the point, are their inboxes being flooded? They're inundated with pitches. And yes, we're seeing a reduced response time, 24 to 72 hours. One of the things we've been doing on Mondays is for particular media groupings or lists that we have, is packaging together a weekly stories opportunity. So that way, instead of sending them, 17 different pitches from various people on the team, we package it together. Here's how it could relate to what you're doing. And then over the past 11 plus years, I've worked to build relationships with media outside of email. So checking in to see what they're sharing, what they're talking about, what they're doing, and either commenting or encouraging clients to comment to get integrated into stories, or pitching them on a back channel of a place where we already have a relationship built. And many of them, I just had a phone call yesterday with someone who works for a top TV outlet who produces something that then gets sent on their distribution wire. She was looking for story ideas. She said, I'm over talking about how to make hand sanitizer at home, but I still need something that has some COVID-19 relativity, but what are some new angles you see coming?
Hey, would you be willing to tell us in more detail how you do this package, like both from a formatting and a design standpoint, maybe the length of the pitches, like what is that?
Absolutely. And I stay away from design, anything too formal. It is specifically email based. What I typically do is highlight no more than 5 to 7 bullet points. I do some sort of intro that's personalized to them. I'll look to see what they're talking about, just in case. Let me just specify, it does change based on if I'm pitching TV versus print versus digital. Mm-hmm. So you may have to change it up. For TV, for example, we'll give the bullet points and then I'll create a little caption next to each that says, here's the visual component, or here's what you can showcase. So if I already have clients who've recorded prepackaged sound bites or templates, if I've got a Dropbox folder to links and visuals, I try to think very visual for them. It's usually 3 to 5 sentences each. I think of a top performing type of headline, set some context, a link to their site, and then include, if it's TV or someone that needs visual, a link to visual assets. And then at the bottom, if they're interested in any of them or need more content, if they need something produced or they just need a quote, they can contact me and we'll put that all together for them.
What have you learned in terms of the length of the email and what tends to do better? Do you find that if you give them too much, you overwhelm them and you don't get as much feedback? What have you learned about how long the total email should be? Not just each pitch in the email, and then how many emails do you think, how many pitches can you have in one email?
So I think short and sweet is always good, but I also think there is no general rule. For example, a few weeks ago, we were pitching about a brand new drone, the first of its kind. It had a UVC attached light, could fly indoors. There's no tech of its kind. It had larger implications because they didn't have brand recognition. So we had to talk about how they were achieving this 99% disinfection rate. We were pitching very tech-heavy publications who are appreciative of more versus less. And anytime we can link, it was already going to be a lengthy pitch, so we started packaging some things together and then link off to them if a reporter wanted more. And it was receiving a ton of response and traction, so people were reading it regardless of the length of that. Right now, for some of the stories that may not be large scale impact, those are the ones we start to package together. And of course, then we're doing one-off pitching as well to various media. But for those we know who are on tight deadlines, still accepting pitches and are looking and have proactively told us, please send us what you have, those are the ones we're packaging together.
So, there's a website called Muck Rack that a lot of people use as a media database service. You use it?
Yeah.
And they just launched a fairly new product called Trends. And you can kind of look at it and see what's trending in the news. So it's a great way to sort of feel like, oh, what's hot right now? What are you using when you put that email together to figure out kind of what to pitch against?
We use at least 4 to 6 different tools. So Muck Rack is one, and I do utilize Trends to check out that. I usually jump in SEMrush to look for content, ironically looking at content marketing or trend ideas, because I want to see what people are talking about. I look at Google Trends. I've custom created Twitter lists for every single media list I develop, so I check that out as well. And then I'll get in various journalism groups that I belong to or PR groups and ask to see what's trending. And then simply just texting or calling the journalists that I have great relationships with every week to see what is on the horizon. And then I'm custom crafting those pitches based on all of that feedback, along with just looking at headlines. We have to look every day.
Sarah, do you feel like it's got to be regular? It's got to come out at the same time every week for people to, and so that it starts to get some traction? Or is it not necessarily, is it intermittent, this email that you put out?
It depends on who I'm pitching. So the email isn't just going to one set list. For example, if I'm pitching an editor at Cheddar, let's say, for example, and I know she's pitching to her producers every Thursday, I want to get it to her by Wednesday morning or Tuesday. And she lets me know what's of most interest, maybe what she wants more information on. And then those are the ones she's going to send forward to her producers on Thursday. If it's my Bloomberg contact, I want to reach her every Monday or potentially every Friday for planning for the next week. If it's a producer at CGTN, she takes them as I get them. So it just depends on nuances and who wants what, when, and having the wherewithal to understand that.
And what do you like for email distribution and link tracking?
So I am all about the one-to-one pitching. So we try to stay within that realm. If we do need to do something that's more of a mass, I guess a mass level outside of wire services, we'll use a combination of GMass and then some back-end link tracking tools that we have for those, which vary. But for the most part, the most success we see does not come from mass pitching. And we get tons of placements, every week. And some of those strategies, like using CNN News Source, where you get, a single hit that then gets distributed down to affiliates across the US, can give you 70 media placements.
You don't use a link tracking tool for the one-on-one email to see if they've opened it or what's going on there?
They'll reply if they want something.
Right. Let's talk for a minute about sort of virality, taking a story and propelling it forward. I remember once at CES, I had a client that had a product, and it's so tough. That show is so busy. There's so much going on, and it's really hard to get attention. And I was concerned we were going to have a hard time getting mainstream media attention, which was what they wanted. So what we did was we actually gave it exclusively to a top blog in their category, and then rather than pitch the story to the mainstream media, we sent a link to the blog post to the mainstream media. And that worked really well. I've been playing a lot with TalkWalker lately, which is a great tool. And they actually have a tool in there called the Virality Map. And you can kind of see over a timeline how a story becomes bigger based on who spreads it and who the key influencers are. Do you ever go that route where you say, we're not going to go straight to media. Let's go to an influencer. Let's get it out through them. Because in this case, the source of the information is maybe even more important than the information itself.
We've done launches like that. We do a whole host of different types of launches. We utilize Product Hunt quite a bit. And we might do an exclusive story pitch along with the Product Hunt launch for those, tech angles or type stories. We're talking about virality of all of this. That drone client that I mentioned, we had such a great strategy and pickup for that. Within 35 days, they've had to hire a new salesperson to take the impact of all of the media operations and a 20% increase in sales. Like you talk about just virality of media, but it has a real bottom line implication, which is beautiful and phenomenal. We didn't have to do an exclusive reach. We had to leverage a situational moment in time, a new product that never existed, and give them some credibility and viability.
I want to talk a little bit more about earned media, and then we're going to transition into social and digital. And we have a question from Xenia Moore, so I'm going to bring her on screen in a moment. I just want you to be ready for that. But in the meantime, what's happening with respect to what type of stories are resonating right now? What do you see? What's working?
Here's what I can tell you what journalists are giving me feedback. me start with that, and then we can talk about what's resonating. Number one is if you don't have brand recognition, just as an example, Budweiser pivoted and started making hand sanitizer. I didn't see any news stories saying, where did the sanitizer come from? What is the effectiveness rate? It was like, okay, they have brand recognition. They said they created sanitizer, it's sanitizer, so we're going to use it. If you're an unknown company pivoting to create hand sanitizer, they're going to want to know, media is going to want to know a lot about, where are you creating this? Is it in a safe facility? What are the ingredients? Who's already purchasing from you? You're obligated to give a lot more information just to vet and to show credibility behind what you are doing, even if it's a goodwill gesture. So I'm finding a lot of additional fact-finding questions. So even if you invent a new product because of COVID-19, it may not get a lot of media traction unless there's already a current buyer or implementation, or you've done testing, or you have some results behind it, versus a big brand or an Elon Musk who says, I have an idea, and it goes viral. Everyday brands may not experience that same success.
And what is it that's resonating now?
So it depends. There are, by news outlet, you have to really see what's happening. For example, if you're looking at Today shows of the world or morning shows, they might still be very focused on hard-hitting news. So not a lot of the human interest or goodwill stories. Yet if you delve down into local media, print, TV, they're looking for some of those, not just human interest angles, but those with major results. For example, in Las Vegas just 2 weeks ago, a local startup donated money towards the Chromebook deficiency here in Las Vegas, but to really make it media worthy, they challenged all of the other tech heads who are here in Las Vegas to also contribute, because we knew for every dollar spent, it could reduce Chromebook deficiency for CCS students by X number of students. So we packaged it together as part of a larger angle. It was still very, much feel good, and it utilized a tech fund that already existed through a nonprofit through the school district. So as you delve from big to small, all of those headlines that are resonating are different. There is no packaged solution right now. As I said, I create those Twitter lists. That's one of the best places I can go for litmus tests. So if you go onto Twitter and click lists on my profile, you'll see I have people segmented out by every single morning show producer. I have local news editors for all of the local outlets across the US. I've got one for CNN, NPR, so you can start to delve into what everyone's talking about at those outlets.
Those lists are amazing, and I will post a link to your Twitter in the chat for everyone so you can grab that. And I want to ask you, are you seeing clients shift budget from paid media over to PR right now? What's happening with that?
Such a great question.
Reallocation of budget.
Yes. So, it's the question right now, even just casually on the street, outside your doors closed from neighbors, how's business doing? Everybody wants to know how everyone else is doing. And I said, maybe from a PR perspective, our bubble's coming a little later for those of us not impacted, because we're not focused maybe on hospitality or other industries that have been hard hit. But what I've seen is an increase right now in not the paid side, not the paid social or just ad spend, but people reallocating budget to do more stories around those companies where they have an actual COVID story to tell. It's obviously not meaningless dollars spent, but it's people who have products they want to launch, information they want to get out, or they've got a great brand story that goes very well right now. And those brands and the brands we're working with in the tech or digital lifestyle space have been trending more on that end versus the paid. I don't know that that's something that's going to continue, but that's where we're at right now.
Talk us through your lists.
Okay, so I see your list. If you want to go to my...
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I pushed the wrong link?
That's okay. If you just change your ID up in the URL to PR Sarah Evans, it'll bring... Oh, there you go. And then you click on lists.
And then I go to your lists, right.
Mm-hmm.
I think I went to the wrong screen.
No worries. Go over to the left list. There you go.
So will you talk us through these?
Sure. So this is something that I use.
It's
oh, it still goes to yours. That's so funny. You can't.
No, I think the link is somewhere up here. Let's see.
Okay. I'm used to going to it from.
Here it is.
Okay.
View lists.
Going to it from my profile. You see, you did. Okay. You went.
And it's cool because they're all public lists, which is really very generous of you.
So they actually weren't public. many of them, because it's something that I use. I always kind of viewed it as proprietary. This is something that I'm doing, and now I decided I want to build one a week to get them out there. So it's comprehensive. We can get them based on the assets and resources we have access to. So if you're listening and you need a media list, or you're interested in something that would impact a wide variety or amount of other PRs, let me know, and our team can help work on building that. So my goal is to be able to click on any of those lists and see at a glance what those media outlets are talking about, who those reporters are retweeting. And I feel like it's an awesome litmus test that is completely untapped right now.
Totally. It's such a great idea. Okay, I'm going to bring Xenia Moore on. Let's give this a try. Hopefully you're ready, Xenia, because I'm going to bring you on.
So excited.
All right, so it says, would you like to answer this question live? I'm learning as I go here, people.
That's okay, practice with us, we're nice.
I don't see her coming on. Let's see if she, I mean, actually, Xenia, if you need me to do something, type it in the chat window so I can see. Let me stop the share here. Xenia, are you there? Well, I don't know if it's going to work. Let me read you her question, okay? Her question is, what tools are you using and recommending?
I love that. So I actually share, because I am, a Twitter fanatic. Usually once a week or every other week, I create my ongoing list of tools that I love. So I'm going to pull this up right here so I don't miss one. And they range from work from home tools or list building tools, whatever it is that I am most interested in. And I do like to give ongoing talks of all of my favorite tools. Let me see if I can find
I got her on. I got her on.
Oh, you do? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well,
you turn on your video and your mic.
I see that I'm on the mic, but I don't see the video part.
Oh man, let me see if I can allow you to do that. Let me see here. Yeah, let's see if this works.
Awesome. I've got my list pulled up, so ready to go.
Can you, Xenia, do you have now the ability to do that?
No, I don't see the ability to do that yet.
All right, let me see here.
I feel like the mystery guest.
Bummer.
Exciting.
I thought you do a panelist, and then you would be, which is what I just did, but it doesn't seem to be working there. But do you have a follow-up, or you can at least talk?
And I can tell you my tools if you'd like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think that was genius and a good reminder about the Twitter lists. So I'm going to get going on that right away.
I love, it's the what's old is new again. I thought I can't be the only one thinking about this, because we've always used them. And I thought, what can we do to help right now, especially with the smaller boutique firms or other places that might not have the resources to create all these, and it's something to help all of us pitch a little better. I view it as something that can be an industry helper, which is great. So Xenia, I'm going to tell you just really quick my list of 11 tools that we're using from a work from home capacity, but they're applicable to PRs in general. Okay. One is Get Shift or Shift. That's what I'm using for all of our email communication. It allows me to integrate everything, including email, Calendly, Zoom, like the 3 different Telegrams, the 7 different Slacks I'm on, Zoom. It brings everything together in one capacity. And our team also gets white labeled in under a lot of companies. So we have an embarrassing amount of email addresses. So it helps me be able to manage and use all of those.
Okay. Are these both for Mac and PC or just for
correct.
Mac? Or,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, both?
Yes. I think it was $99 for the pro account, which we needed because we were already over the free limit within like the first 3 accounts. Slack, which you've probably heard of, it's something that we use, and Slack is also integrated into GetShift. This is one of my favorite tools, and it's the most simple, but it's so important to our team. If you are a Google Chrome user, Toby for tabs. It is a browser organizer, if you will, a browser bookmark tool, but I actually use it in a very strategic workflow sort of way, where I keep in a private document all of our master media lists, current pitches we have going on, individual story media lists, press releases, our Dropbox press files, current media reports, and client assets. Those are all of the documents I keep up at any given time. So anytime I open a new tab, all of those things are visible to me, so I can quickly reference them. From an onboarding or company perspective, I have a public tab that includes all of our favorite digital PR tools, so some of the ones that I'm mentioning now, our meetings, tools, and resources, our guest posting opportunities, and any Twitter lists I want everyone on the team to be following and interacting with. This is also great from an onboarding perspective. So if you have new client documents or new hire documents, you can keep them all on these tabs and everyone has access to at all times. So I can't say enough good things about that. Zoom, which we're already using today.
How do you spell? Is it Toby? How do you spell that?
Toby.
Okay.
For Chrome.
Okay.
The next one, I feel like I try to give away my arsenal. I don't know how many people actually end up using these things, but I feel like it sets us apart. Inc. Inkforall.com. It is, the simple way to say it would be like Grammarly plus SEO, but it's so much more than that. And they've got some amazing features that they release regularly. I do all of my writing in that, anything that has to do with content marketing, because it's smarter than anything I could ever do. They have custom built AI, and all of our content has started to rank and trend higher since we have used this. And it just gets everything done faster, so you don't have to know it yourself as a PR person, and it's really best in class. For the next tool, I'll just quickly talk about, because it's enterprise level, it's Turbine Labs. That's our monitoring system that we use for clients. It's amazing, but typically enterprise level pricing. They do a daily COVID-19 executive briefing that I send on to most of our clients. That's free and extremely beneficial. Muckrack, which Eric mentioned, I can't live without. Calendly to manage our calendars. I know you asked about some email services. SendGrid is one that we used, Eric. I know we were talking about that. And then we utilize Squarespace and Google Drive. So those are my 11 biggies.
Cool. Nice. Here's a great question from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, for a solo practitioner with limited resources, what's the best way to reach a national network? You mentioned CNN earlier. For a client that has national intentions, client wants to be national, Story is live online soccer classes for toddlers and young children. Great visuals, relatively unknown, but ambitious.
So I think that's the perfect opportunity to go to those local creators for the major networks and get one of them to get your story that then gets distributed to all of the affiliates nationwide. Those are the folks we really love to check in with weekly. That's something you do have to research. You know, it takes years to build those relationships and be able to get them to respond right away, but it doesn't mean it won't work. You just have to do your due diligence and know what those services are, who you contact for them, and then be very strong in your pitch. You see great results from that regularly.
I see a lot of familiar faces in the amongst the attendees. Hey, Ross. Hey, Scott. Hey, Tim. Thanks for coming. Michael, thanks for coming back. I'm not sure if you were last week, but I thank you for your email at the beginning of last week's show. Michael, Mary Beth, Lisa, everyone, welcome. Do we have any other questions, or should we just keep going on? If anyone has questions, you can either put the questions preferably in the Q&A section of Zoom rather than the chat. And for the chat, it's wide open. So if people just want to network amongst themselves or trade and swap stories or resources there, please feel free to do so. Let's talk for a minute about social media. You know, there's people who get social media and there's people that do social media. You know, you've always been, like, in my book, somebody who really gets social media. You know, and I feel like sometimes I get social media and sometimes I don't. It's like sporadic with me. Like sometimes I'll be engaging and everything will be going great, and the next day it's crickets, you know? So what sort of tips, what sort of basic tips can you give us about how best to use social media to propel a story forward?
Well, right now, one of the things I'm definitely making a point to say in every single interview is creating some sort of emotional compass that you keep in front of you and your clients at any given time. And on that list,
what is an emotional compass? Tell me about that.
It's essentially a list of major thoughts and feelings that the majority of folks in the world or in your market have right now, whether that's being furloughed or out of work, having health issues or someone in their family who could be ill, increased anxiety or concerns about health, or isolation, depression, and anxiety. And when we are getting ready to put together messages or press releases or anything like that, we kind of gauge it against the compass. Does this in fact help, harm, hurt, support? What is this doing in regards to what we know that people are going to be feeling, and how are we driving that? Is it going to be negative? Is it going to be positive? And that's something that I've always inherently done with social, is thinking about intention of the information that we are sending out. And I think that's something all brands can do, and it's relatively simple. And as a PR person, you can show value and credibility by kind of being that final check, that final gut check, the final emotional check to make sure things are going to resonate, and protect the brand, because you also want to protect your client and make sure they're not going to make a very sad or memorable mistake that would cost them reputation or dollars.
Yeah, boy, I'm just looking over the attendees here, man. We have a serious brain trust of PR folks on this. We have the former president of the PRSA, Cheryl Proctor Rogers, on the call. We have Gail Murphy on the call, Gina Milani. I mean, this is a real power. I want you guys to step up with questions, okay? Here's a question from Ross Halleck with Halleck Vineyards. And they're a winemaker up in Napa Valley. And he says, is social media worth the investment in time? What are the metrics that drive that answer?
I think, I don't know if this is going to be the best answer because it's not a complete answer, but it depends on what your objective is. As a PR person, it's one of the core places that I've built media relations, which then translates into story pickup and media stories being utilized, which in turn, helps our bottom line. But it's a place for amplification, for example. So let's say you get a great story pickup. What do you do with it then from an organic standpoint or a social standpoint? We typically work with our clients to create a list of X number of amplification tactics, where it's how do we repurpose this on social and give it some longevity? How do we use this as a third-party credibility endorsement in response to FAQs that come out online? Can we use this in our email signatures for 30 to 60 days to enhance credibility? Somebody else saying something, positive, good, or a mention about our brand. On social, it's a great way to build brands. One of the things we do when we onboard clients in our new client questionnaire is to talk about what brands would you eventually like to partner with. Many times before social, that could take a long time to be affiliated with someone or just get in the door, where now you can tag a brand or a brand advocate on social and start to build that relationship and inherently start to package things together. I don't know the size of the vineyard, but let's say you notice a trend with something in wine, but it's better packaged together as a larger trend story. Finding other vineyard owners on social or creating social content that can resonate to a wider audience, utilizing people in your network. So I know these aren't the hard numbers you're looking for, but I typically look in terms of opportunity and what can be done with it, and then we'll see what kind of results we're getting to see if it should stick or not.
It's interesting. When you use social media to amplify an existing story, you still have to have the story to amplify in the first place. Right. And I think a lot of times people go to social thinking, oh, this is just a place to talk. But you're really talking about something. And if you have something credible to reference, the likelihood that the story is going to get some amplification is better. I put together this little graph. Can you see this?
Yes. And Eric, I think when you originally posted this, I saw it and I loved it.
So we look at these sort of three spheres: owned media, which would be your website, your blog, email, perhaps your social media profile page; shared media, that which is shared on a platform that you don't own; and then earned media, what we've been talking about most of this call, really the area of public relations, building visibility and credibility through third-party editorial endorsements. And so once you have that third-party editorial endorsement, going to shared media is a way to earn credibility. You see in the overlap of earned and shared, I put credibility. Then when you look at the overlap between owned and earned media, That's really about influence. If you're bylining on a mainstream media website, right, you then get the implied endorsement of having been published there. And of course, the overlap of owned and shared, that's the visibility. That's what we're talking about here. So when you think about sort of mapping out the strategy and you want to find the people in social that are going to have the most influence and the most leverage, right? Because you find when you look at a virality map, there's one or two people that if they share it early on, it goes viral.
Yes.
Right? How do you find those online influencers?
So part of that is a combination of perhaps a bit more pricier products we have access to, along with more dedicated hand curation and research. And it depends what social network you're looking for and what you want to accomplish. Obviously, we spend a lot of time working with journalists, but if we're running an influencer campaign, and you have to look about, number one, what's your budget? That's bottom line for this, because the types of folks you get to talk about something may have a higher price tag associated with them than you're willing to spend, and also the time to hire a firm who actually does influencer relations can be a bit pricey. There are lots of kind of pre-packaged or pay and play sites like Social Native and those sorts of things where you can go and pay and say, I have a product, I want to reach X number of influencers, and they've got a back end put together where they can manage that all for you. On our end, let's say because we work in digital lifestyle, we're not doing a lot of consumer facing products, but we'll look for subject matter experts or thought leaders. And one of the things that we do in the back end is think, how can we give them influence? Of course, if budget's there, we want to pay them, but how can we also extend influence to them? So working with large brands that have to do that, we'll usually utilize services on our end, like the Turbine Labs of the world and Muckrack, which do have a higher price point, to start to look for those folks. And then simply, one of the easiest things, I keep talking about Twitter, is once you find one of those influencers, look to see who they're following, look to see on their follower list, look to see who they're interacting with, and go down the rabbit hole of research. If budget isn't on your side right now, but you have some time or man hours, do that manual research to see who's in that wheelhouse of those folks to start to find them.
Sarah, this is from Michael Shepard. So what kind of success are you seeing with sponsored posts integrated with your organic content? And how is the C-suite viewing those outcomes?
That's such a great question. And right now, we talked about moving a bit more away from paid. In the past, we saw great results, especially when we get those media hits. One of the ways that we were getting a ton of conversion on sites was a combination of this earned and organic along with paid. So we get these great third-party mentions, transition those into some ad opportunities and sponsored posts and get them back to the site for conversions, which are great. The other thing that we do on our end is if we're going to be reaching out to a media list, this isn't post-story, this is pre-story, we'll also target them with some appropriate ads if we're going to be reaching out to them so that they start to build brand recognition or name recognition. So they saw it on Facebook ad, now it's in their inbox, maybe that's correlated for them. And then sponsored content in general, like Instagram ads or Facebook pieces, if they are consumer-facing products, those tend to perform much better than ideation or tech products that are a bit more complex and need more love. So we'll look at more appropriate places for those. If it's B2B, we'll go to LinkedIn. If it's more of a Reddit audience, we'll look there. Product Hunt has great sponsored ad opportunities. So we're not just limiting it to one kind of general overview, but we look for the best places.
My friend Kemi Heiza, who is out of, I think it's El Paso, Texas, but she was on this show 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I had heard her, she does a morning LinkedIn Live, and she was talking to Scott Bardell of, Orchard PR, I don't remember the name, I apologize, Scott. And Scott was talking about community and Forbes Council and, the Biz Journal Council, and I noticed you are a Forbes Council member. And that's really an interesting organization because in addition to the networking, it gives you a way to publish on Forbes. Now, you can't just, it's edited and you got to talk about things and you can't hand out a bunch of links. It's not a SEO opportunity. But, it's a great way to sort of secure placement on Forbes. And one of the things they mentioned is when you do get the placement on Forbes, it winds up trending as a notification on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So the reason I want to bring it up is because the COO of that organization is our guest on this show in 2 weeks. So if you're interested in Forbes Council or any of that program community, we'll table that for now and come back to it. I want to go to a question from Gail Falkenthal. She says, at what point do you need to tell a client to focus on owned and shared and less on earned when you're burning through budget and a client simply doesn't have the worthwhile pitch at that moment? I love this question.
I do too, and I feel like this is an excellent workshop opportunity. I don't know that I am the expert source on that. I mean, I obviously have experienced it and we do have to guide, but it is so situational. I've got some great clients where we are always looking at what numbers are resonating, so we pivot very quickly. So the decision is kind of made for us. Like, we're not resonating here, so we need to switch here this week or this month based on what's happening. But I think it's situational. I would love to hear from you guys in the chat area what you've done in these scenarios, because I don't know about you, Eric. I don't know that there's a one size fits all.
Come on screen, let me know, and I'll elevate you to the analyst. You can tell us about it. I mean, I can tell you, I think it leads to a lot of failed client agency relationships, because typically the client comes through the door wanting earned media. That's what drives them to PR in the first place. And the last thing they want to hear from the agency is, you're not ready yet. But the truth is, if you're not ready, you're not ready. If you don't have your message together, you got to get your message together. In the old days, it was as easy as putting a press kit together. Now you need a freaking website. And not only that, you need a community. You have to have some history online. People need to see you're connected to. So really, I mean, I advocate a growth PR strategy that starts with owned. You know, first, what is your message? Do you have a beachhead online? 2, shared media. Do people in the space know you? Are they connected to you? Do they respect you? Once you've got those 2 things, you can do earned media, because the first thing earned media is going to do is check you out online. And so if there's no history there, you're a ghost, you know, and they're not going to risk their reputation on something like that.
Yeah, and we have an onboarding guide that we go through with clients. So the answer pretty much gives itself, especially if it's for launching something. Are you ready or not? You can't answer these 20 questions that we have put together, 25, whatever it is. It's inherent that you're not. So and most of the time, people coming to us respect myself and our team members. So eventually they're asking, tell us what we need to do, because they're at a loss. We're getting ready to launch a few products in the next 3 weeks. And almost all of them are going out on product hunt first, because when there isn't community yet, and you need to identify a place where there already is community where it can fit. So strategizing around that as well. That's why I don't think there's a one size fits all response for that.
This is from Gail Murphy, my friend Gail. Thanks for joining us, Gail. Thanks for your email. Can you articulate how using online formats has changed your business as well as your client media relationships?
Oh my gosh. Gail, it's such a good question, and will really force me to think, because it's changed everything. I feel like I worked myself out of a traditional career because of it. Was able to start my company 11 years ago and do something that I never thought was possible. I was from small town Illinois, now living in Las Vegas with a company. I feel like it allowed me to build a network when I didn't need one. And it has allowed me to do 30 years of networking in 10, maybe more than that. So I feel like, number one, the exponential reach we have access to is something. And I feel like I need to knock on wood, but our company has been very unique in that we get all reactive requests for business. I don't do traditional business development because our clients typically are recommending us, or the content we're putting out online or through my social channels are inherently bringing in business referrals. So I don't even know that I can communicate it effectively, just that it's working, and I try to just do good and be good online and take my personal level of customer service and deliver that everywhere.
Jonna Burke is with us. Jonna, thanks so much for showing up. She's the Global Managing Director of the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communication, AMEC. And I recently did a 54-page, I kid you not, vendor-neutral white paper that no one paid me to write on media monitoring. It's a buyer's guide. It's got all sorts of analysis, a side-by-side features comparison chart with all the different platforms. It's free at ericschwarzman.com/monitoring. And Jana was so generous with me in the writing of that paper. She hooked me up with some really interesting CEOs and folks at agencies to really expand my knowledge of media monitoring. And she says, since Sarah's always so generous, here's one she should add to her free list. It's called answerthepublic.com, and it allows people to see what's being searched using autocomplete data. How interesting. You ever do the autocomplete and kind of like, oh, maybe I should go down that road. She says it's a free tool created by Coverage Book. And then she recommends them as future guests for this show. If you want to hear from them, let me know in the chat window if that sounds interesting to you. Jana, thanks so much for your comment. Here's an anonymous question. I love this question. Especially, as a question for us, PR people, with respect to reputation. How important is your company website?
So pre-COVID-19 or
This is the new normal. So post.
Yeah, so post. I feel like my opinion has changed on this in the past years, and now it's moved back into extremely important, simply because people may check or see you sourced on websites, and now they're spending more time online, so going back to your website to see if it invokes a feel of credibility, if that makes sense. So they might see or hear your name on social, they might see it in paid or earned or ads, and then they're now coming back to that hub, that main area, which is your website. So I think it's of extreme importance that it both invokes credibility and that it is credible and that you're providing additional news information and resources as it relates to the world right now.
So I'm going to add something to this, and I want to reference the late Julie Nathanson, who passed away 2 days ago. She was an executive at Rogers & Cowan, which was the PR agency where I began my career. And I remember once when I was just getting started, we were putting together a press kit for a client. And this was the days before people had websites. And I wanted to do like this printed press kit and make it all slick and glossy. And she said, no, you don't want to do that. Because if it's too slick and glossy, the press won't feel like they're discovering it. They'll feel like it's already discovered and everybody's getting it. So she took a frickin' Post-it note and wrote the name of the client, put it on the dual pocket presentation folder, stuffed in some stuff with some handwritten notes on it, and sent that off to CNN. And I thought that was so brilliant. But if you apply that to the question of the website, right, I guess it really does depend. Like if you're digital lifestyle, you better have a good website. But if you're maybe a small restaurant that's just opening in a market and you want to get a breakout story, you want to be seen as a scoop, maybe having something, a little kind of clunky might actually help.
I mean, I think that's really fair. I think we're learning a new normal, and it's one of those instances now where you know the rules and then you break them as it fits you for what you need right now. And people are much more forgiving right now. What if you say, I couldn't afford to pay for web right now when I can't even afford my employees? That's a story too. So I guess it's all situational.
Okay, John, if you're still on the call, Cheryl Proctor Rogers, who, by the way, Cheryl, I heard your keynote about diversity in Salt Lake City at conference years ago, and it totally expanded my way of thinking about diversity as a business strategy. So thank you for that. She says, bring them on. So Jana, let's do it. Let's have your recommendations on PR Tech Wednesdays. Tim McMahon, who is also a friend and who I've powwowed with over the years, has a question. He says, are you using Answer the Public?
Well, that's the one I'm going to go check it out.
What are the specific listening tools you find useful for identifying trending topics? Actually, Tim, I'm gonna table it because we don't have that much time left and we do have a lot of questions. I want you to look at the replay of this because she gives a stack of really cool tools for figuring out what's trending. She gives her whole list. Ross has another question. He says, when you use the word community, what is the number that constitutes community? He says, we have a wine club of 600 with a national opt-in list of 6,000 who are engaged. On a national scale, this is incremental, but it supports and grows our business. Is this a relevant number in relation to the PR community?
I think number is going to also, I feel like this entire time I've said, well, it's situational, and it is, because if you're pitching the media, you have to set context around the number, right? So it is 6,000 out of 10,000, or, you know, you start looking at what that number is out of to help tell your story. And that number may be meaningful. Is there another way you can phrase that number as 60%? Or, you know, you start to look about how you can use those numbers. I don't think that there is a number itself that constitutes community, because if you're packaging together a trend piece and it's 4 or 5 out of an industry that is smaller in numbers, that also resonates very well, and everyone has to start somewhere. I don't like to get bogged down in the numbers unless it's essential for part of a story or storytelling. You know, an engaged 10 people and engaged 600 people, it makes a difference. But if you're a startup and you're trying to pitch the TechCrunches of the world and you have, you know, 10 users, is that a story that's going to resonate? Likely not. But if you have 10,000 users pre-go live, that's something of significance. So you have to look at what is the community for? Are you using it to tell a story? Are you using it to build a product? Are you using it to crowdsource? Are you using it to fundraise? And then what you plan to do with that. Is it something that's always going to remain organic and supportive? Do you plan to monetize them? That also changes what you have the ability to do. So think about, well, why that number is important, why you're tracking it, and what you plan to do with it. And I know that's a vague way to answer that, Ross. I'm sorry.
Ross, I think it's totally a valid number to work with. Particularly, I mean, I guess it depends how much information you have. I mean, if you have their email and it's not their spam email, I think, yeah, you could probably get going with that and probably institute some strategies to build that list, because really that's what it's about, right? It's about using social media and earned media and own media to get people's information to build a list so that you can send information to them and try to convert them to a sale. I mean, that's sort of the big picture for e-commerce. When you think about the programs you're doing, because we've been talking mostly about the use of social for media relations here, is that always, for the most part, in your practice, is that always the objective, media relations, or do you go direct to consumer on social as well?
All of it. All the above. In fact, you know, we've worked on creating or leveraging owned media for brands as well, where I serve as a digital correspondent and consultant. So without using the term influencer, because I don't know that I am that, but I do support a very specific space. Also working with different brands like Adobe and SAP as a B2B influencer, leveraging their tools and resources, creating content for them, also building relationships with journalists, and then also as a creative space for myself. One of the things I did all last year was to do a thought of the day every day. And I started to view that as my digital archive or my digital legacy for my children. If they went back one day and wanted to see what mom was thinking about, they would have access to this. Something I wanted to keep doing, but I feel like in the midst of COVID-19, now that none of us are separated from each other, I haven't had as much reflection time in the morning as I once did that I built in. So it's a multitude of ways, but I'm very specific in the ways I do and do not use social.
Before I forget, you know, you're in the trade show capital of the world, and it's also a huge hospitality town, and hospitality's dead. So what's going on in Vegas? Characterize the scenario for us. What's it like on the Strip? What's it like in the supermarkets? What's going on?
So I think a quick litmus test on our street, my husband and I are probably the only fully employed 2-person household right now. Our neighbors across the street work in trade shows. He's had his company for 30 years. It's completely shut down. All of our neighbors are out of work. I think we're the #1 in unemployment in the US right now. My husband sells beer, so he's an essential employee, but I mean, his pay is going to go down because the majority of his sites are closed down. It's definitely impacting our community. I was talking to a mom on the phone yesterday in the neighborhood who she stays home and her husband is furloughed and they only get one more paycheck. And he works at a hotel. So there's a lot unknown. People are very nervous trying to figure out what to do next. I know several people who are asking me, like, what online classes should I be doing? We just brought on temporarily 2 hospitality PR executives from other firms in Vegas to support our efforts. And they can stay with us as long, as they need to, but there's a lot unknown.
Yeah. I mean, I have like 20 online classes, and I've seen attendance on those pretty much double. And podcasting is pretty much flat. You would have thought that with everyone at home and not commuting and not at the gym, that it would go down, but it's actually off about 4%.
Really?
So, yeah, and it had a bigger dip, and then I subscribed to a killer a newsletter. Oh gosh, Podbeat. I'll remember it in a second. I'll post
Tell me,
it.
I have to add it to my tools.
Oh, it's a killer newsletter.
Okay.
I will find it and I will post it to the chat tool in a second. So in terms of the whole trade show world, I mean, any sense of when that's coming back? Have you heard anything from people who are building booths? Are they getting orders? What's going on?
The only thing that we've seen, and it was 2 days ago, that came out from one of the big hotels, and now I'm blanking, but May 31st is now the new date on hold. Every day we talk to folks, though, we're just experiencing more layoffs and furloughs. So I don't know. One of the things, I mean, just at a very simple level, the local restaurants, especially the smaller ones, our family's trying to order from every day. And we're encouraging anyone who can afford it to do the same, just to keep them in business. The last thing we want are more businesses closing and more restaurants going out of work.
The newsletter is called Hot Pod.
Hot Pod. Thank you.
Comes out once a week, and it's the real deal. The guy who runs it is a former night journalist, Brent Winter, and now he does it on his own. And they really get a lot of scoops about what's happening in that world of podcasting. Interesting note from last week's guest. Actually, no, it was not a guest on this show. I do another show. If you're interested in lead generation, if you're in performance marketing, interested in funnels and that type of thing, optimization, I do a show called the B2B Lead Gen Podcast. It's just a podcast. It's not live. And I had Eric Sue on, who's the guy who's partnered with Neil Patel on Marketing School. That's like one of the #1 podcasts. And he said, when I break down where my leads come from, about half comes from search, which is why I had said to everyone at the beginning, when I made the class free on SEO, 50% is coming from search. You need to learn search. He said 35% comes from speaking opportunities and networking. Well, that's off the table. And then he said 15% comes from podcasts, but those people convert at a much higher rate, much shorter sales cycle, much higher amount, because they know me already. I've been in their ears. They get who I am. And if they've responded to me and they like my personality, they're going to like me in person as well, because I am who I am. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Oh my God, we are over. So I've got to wrap this up.
Okay, I have a client call.
I never go over. Okay, why don't I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to do the closing announcements. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. You are a gem. It's a pleasure to know you, and thank you so much for your time.
Likewise, Sarah. Okay, so I just want to thank our 2 presenting supporting sponsors. Special thanks to Flux Branding, a world-renowned resource for defining your visual brand. Flux Branding is a group of creative visionaries and graphics designers designed to help clients build brand identities, and you can visit them at ericschwartzman.com/Flux Branding. And I want to thank Digital Dragon, where children can develop the skills they need to prosper in the digital world. Digital Dragon teaches digital literacy to tomorrow's programmers, and you can get more information about them at ericschwartzman.com/DD. Now, next week, I'm really excited because if you are at all interested in LinkedIn's acquisition of Lynda, what that's meant, and if you're interested in maybe authoring a course on LinkedIn Learning, I have with us next week Martin Waxman, who's done a number of courses, top performing courses about public relations on LinkedIn Learning. And we're going to talk all about online courses, particularly around online courses for lead generation, online courses to make a market for premium goods and services. So I hope you'll join us for that. You know, I got so excited with this week's show that I went over. I don't typically go over. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, if you're watching this on YouTube Live, if you're watching this on Periscope, come on into the Zoom call and join it, you know, join into the conversation, ask questions. You can sign up at prtechwednesdays.com. We do this every Wednesday from 12 to 1. It's free. You just sign up at prtechwednesdays.com. And even if you can't make it, we'll send you out a link to the replay. We also have set up a podcast on this too. So if you are a podcast listener, you can get the replays on iTunes or on Spotify. This has been Eric Schwartzman, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. So many familiar faces, or familiar names at least, that I've seen out there, and I'm grateful to have you with me. And I hope next time you guys will come on screen and ask some more questions. Okay, I think I've almost figured it out. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.